So I'm Deputy Catherine Curtis, the chair of the panel.
I'm Conatard Mark Labby, I'm Vice Chair.
Deputy Mayor Lahegara, Minister for Justice and Home Affairs.
Constable Richard Vibert, Assistant Minister for Justice and Home Affairs.
Arthur Soligoda, Acting Prison Governor.
Good morning, Robert Smith, Chief of Police.
Morning, Kate Bryden, Chief Officer of Justice and Home Affairs.
Andrew Hunt, Deputy Head of Customs and Immigration.
And Nathan Fox, Associate Director of Justice Policy.
Okay, thanks everyone. And Deputy, we have two deputies who just can't join us today. We have 1.5 hours for this hearing, and our first questions are around the French day trip scheme and the ETAs. So, Minister, following the States Assembly's decision to extend the French ID card travel scheme, could you explain how you envisage the scheme operating alongside the UK's ETA system, which is due to be implemented in Jersey?
Yes, as by way of an update, there's potentially going to be a slight delay in us getting the ETA, and it's likely to be us, Guernsey and the Isle of Man in early 2026. But obviously the legislation will need to come to the Assembly probably in September. The intention is that we'll do the day trip scheme through a minor change in the Jersey immigration rules, so that we can exempt French nationals on day trips using their ID cards, so that they won't have to obtain an ETA. Because as we've already discussed on numerous occasions, they're not actually compatible.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting. So when will we hear more about this plan, about the getting people to able to come in through these changes to the immigration system?
Oh, well, they're actually coming in at the moment. It's only really when the sort of ETA would come in that it would then create the problem.
Okay.
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. So I think it's business as usual until such time as we do get the ETA. But obviously in that interim period, we will need to make the changes to the law in order that we can have that ability for them to come in without having an ETA.
Yeah, because it was going to come in isn't it, September this year, the ETA?
Yeah, I think everything's pushed back, isn't it, I think?
Yeah, so a couple of reasons for those delays. Firstly is getting the required legislation through the States Assembly, so that's taken more time than we envisaged. So looking to lodge this month for a debate in September. And then on the UK side, there are certain issues, technological is one, that are taking a bit of time to work through. But as the Minister said, we're looking to Q1 2026 for a firm deadline for introduction now.
Can I just add, Chair, that we've just had the Jumelage Games over the last weekend, where nearly 100 French participants came over to Jersey to participate, and most of them are on the ID card. So we thank you for your persistence in this matter.
So once this is in place, if it's going to be in place in early 26, are there, what are the operational and legal challenges arising, and do you have steps to address the risks that will be coming?
When you say, what do you mean by legal challenges exactly?
So that the French ID plan can carry on as it is, once the ETA is in place, how is that going to work? Is there a plan on how to continue it without challenges arising from continuation of?
Well, I think the thing is to make it quite clear, there'll be a change in the law so that they can still come in on the ID card for the day trip. And of course, those are quite strict rules. So it's with certain ferry companies. So it's not like they can get on a plane and come here. It's to do with the ferries and the different small boats that come to Jersey. So those rules won't change, and so they'll at the moment, there's been no legal challenges to it as far as I'm aware. So that should remain the same. We'll just need to say within the legislation, or the immigration rules, I should say, that we will be allowing French nationals on day trips with an ID card, so therefore they won't have to have the ETA, but that will be strictly, as I said, it's with the ferry companies, it's not across the piece. So all of the rules that apply now will remain the same. So all those that aren't able to travel on their ID cards at present will have to have an ETA.
Okay, so for this to continue, for people to come in on the ID cards, there was a letter, wasn't there, from the UK government raising concerns about the scheme. So have those concerns been addressed, and will it be able to continue?
Let's make this sort of quite clear. The engagement with the UK in 2023 and 2024 result in informal concerns being expressed and the use of security of an ID card. The security of the CTA border and the interaction of ID cards and in relation to ETA. And that was where our sort of glitch was a bit concerning, because we didn't see how we were going to be able to. But thankfully, Customs and Immigration have found an opportunity somewhere else, so that it's a little bit of a carve up with the Jersey immigration rules in relation to this minor sort of thing. We've not received any ministerial response in relation to from the Parliamentary Under Secretary for State for Migration and Citizenship to date, and we'd written to them, and I think we followed up as well after the vote, and we haven't heard anything back. Obviously, there was some that were spoken to, as you saw within the media, that asked their views, but nobody has come back to us formally in any way to say anything about what we've agreed within our own States Assembly. So nobody's come back formally. We've had no letters, and so obviously there was discontent from the shadow minister, and it was the previous government who'd written, I believe, a letter that I'd seen, and the previous Justice and Home Affairs minister. But obviously, as I said, we've had dialogue. Customs and Immigration have been having dialogue with officers all the way, and even before this, they're always in dialogue, because obviously we're crossing borders all the time. All of our imports and exports come in and out of there, so we're always in dialogue with Customs and Immigration in the UK. But we've had nothing formally to say whether they're happy or not.
Okay, so there hasn't been any letter from the current government at all? Oh, because that was quite confusing in the...
Yeah, I think, yeah.
So then there is a plan for this to continue even when the ETA comes in?
Yes, that's what we agreed in the States Assembly. That's why we're going to change the rules.
So that's, okay. So the Jersey doesn't require a formal exemption from the ETA regime, doesn't need that?
No, I'm right in saying our immigration rules are our own.
Yeah.
However, we do belong to the CTA. And so, from that aspect, we follow the UK, and maybe I'll ask Customs just to formally make sure that I've got my facts right. But I think, from our perspective, it is about the fact that we are a member of the CTA. That was the choice we made at Brexit within the States Assembly, that we would be part of the CTA. But I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
No,
to
I
that.
think we've always taken, in respect of our relationship with the CTA and the UK, a policy of alignment, but not automatic replication of the immigration rules. We have our own unique requirements and challenges, and it's important to take those into account when we're looking to, to apply or to supply what the UK are looking to introduce. So, the UK are concerned about the security of the common travel area, as are we. It's in the forefront of our minds. But you mentioned risks before. We've got a wide range of mitigation in place to minimise those risks to what we believe is an acceptable level, including restricting the scheme just to French nationals, just on commercial ferries, in conjunction with memorandum of understanding with the carrying companies, and also the fact that immigration permission for those travelling on ID cards only extends to Jersey and not beyond. Therefore, if anybody was to travel to the UK or to Guernsey, the Isle of Man, during their day trip, they would actually be entering there unlawfully.
Okay, so just to confirm, it looks like the French ID card scheme as it is now should be able to continue to operate even when the ETA regime is in place, bearing in mind the mitigations that you've said.
That's certainly our intention.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, good. Okay, great. So I would just want to ask, has the Customs and Immigration Service have the capacity to support the continuation of the scheme as well in case there's any more administrative requirements that come about?
As it stands, there's no additional resource requirements. The number of cases of non-compliance is very low, so we're happy that we can manage it within our day-to-day work. Okay, good.
Okay, I think that's okay for those questions there.
Thank you. And again, I'd like to say formally that, we're very keen as, Conatab with our jumelage that those conditions remain. The next section is about the prison service. Minister, can you update the panel on the current status and timetable of the action plan for prisoners and neurodivergent needs at La Moy and confirm what resources have been allocated to implement it?
If you don't mind, I'll ask the Arta to respond to that, because obviously he's got today's assessment on it.
Yes, of course. So we have a action plan in terms of how we can address neurodivergent needs in our population. We don't have exact numbers because lots of prisoners will do the self-referral or self-assessment, and unfortunately prison doesn't have its own way or avenue to speed up those assessments, and waiting lists in the community are very lengthy. So for example, waiting list for ADHD assessment is up to 2 years, and if we make a referral for anyone in our custody, they will be waiting in the same list as anyone in the community. However, we are working on early identification and screening arrangements, and since the prison healthcare model has changed and we are now in the same healthcare system, it's much easier to address needs of those prisoners which come to our custody with diagnosis already in place. Therefore, they receive this treatment straight away. Those which do self-refer will be referred for assessment, and as a first step will be seen by GP. We'll see what we can do in that arrangement. At the same time, we have applied for community funding to purchase a self-assessment tool which will help us in identifying the needs. So even if someone doesn't have the official assessment, we can support them in changing the environment and put them a specific case management plan that can support that person in our custody. Next step is the training and awareness for our staff, which will include modules on autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, and other neurotypes. And then we have a much better neurodiversity network amongst our staff. We have had a presentation from Antia Carol, Deputy Head of Springfield School, about neurodiversity, and we'll have more training sessions with staff planned for this year as well. Next point is reasonable adjustment and supports for prisoners which we have in custody, which I mentioned that on the case management plan. So we'll offer them more sensory-friendly cells, accessory to sensory tools, fidget items, ear defenders if someone is struggling with the noise which is generated on the wings, and we do have situations like that. Visual timetables and easy to read materials. We have some reading pens as well for those people which do struggle with reading and have dyslexia issues. Overlays for literacy support if it's needed as well, and we do assign peer mentors to some of the prisoners which have neurodiversity needs as well. Of course, on the top of that, we work on inclusive education and employment for the prisoners as well. And even, as I mentioned, if someone doesn't have a diagnosis, while we can see they struggle in certain aspects of the prison life, we will offer them support as we feel is suitable. Also, healthcare and mental health integration, so ADHD medication and management, autism-informed mental health support. We have a dedicated mental health nurse in the prison now, and visits from community psychiatric nurse are happening more often than used to under new healthcare models. So we offer much better support than previously as well. Then communication and advocacy for those prisoners which we have in our custody with neurodiverse needs. And this is offered as well by My Voice, which is independent advocacy charity. to our prisoners, and monitoring and evaluation, and because that population changes regularly, and we need to make sure that we pick up on those as well. So any person that comes to our custody will be interviewed by the custody manager and the healthcare nurse, and that's those two processes. Well, we're hoping that pick up on the screening, and there's a secondary healthcare screening within 72 hours, because not always people which we receive in custody are quite keen to reveal the issues that they have on the first visit, the first conversation. So after 72 hours, sometimes it's much easier to have those open and honest conversations. So that's how the plan works in this moment in time.
Thank you. You've answered about 10 questions. One of my questions was about training for your staff at Qtly. You've very kindly given that to us. Has the prison service entered into formal partnerships with external specialists, for example, CAMS, occupational therapists, or charities? You mentioned a charity to support the neurodivergence plan.
Not formal as in the sense of a contract, but whenever we need the needs, we can signpost people, or we have avenues to contact people. As we have some service level agreements with certain charities, but this is a wider activity that we're going to complete this year and next year in terms of commissioning charities to do work for us, because we need to formalize the process. So we're at early stages. We work with a number of charities, but not all those relationships have been formalized yet.
Okay, thank you. Given the additional pressures that managing neurodivergent and younger prisoners can place on staff, what well-being and support programs are you now in place for prison officers, and how are you monitoring staff morale and retention in these specialist areas?
So those officers which are working with neurodivergent prisoners are working in special departments where those prisoners are housed. They have contact with a prison psychologist, and there's a process which is called self-reflective practice, and then that gives them an opportunity to share their experiences, and if they have any difficulties, then they've been signposted by our psychologists to further support if it's needed as well.
Good, thank you. Turning to young people in custody, can you outline what progress has been made since the last hearing on reducing the length of time young people spend in isolation wings, and on ensuring they have daily access to facilities like their education, purposeful activity, and mental health support?
So those children in our custody, young people in our custody, have regularly reviewed regime, and they have access to PE department, sporting activities. Those which are required to education, we make sure they do attend education. Those which don't have to attend education will still being offered access to activities. One of those young people is now completing the course for cleaning skills, which has been offered to a wider population. They're all attending catering department in the afternoon hours to prepare their own dinners and learn basic skills in the catering department, and also basic hygiene in that environment as well. Some of them have never had skills like that, so it gives them an opportunity to learn something new. Whilst considering that the accommodation and by the arrangements we need to keep those children separate, we always ensure that they have access to all the activities as other prisoners in our custody will have. Of course, not at the same time, because we need to keep them separate.
Yeah. You've already explained the mental health support, so thank you. Minister, can you advise the panel what is the timeline for introducing compulsory post-custodial supervision?
Drafts of the Prison Jersey Amendment Law and the associated prison release of prisoners on licensed Jersey regulations have been developed. These are intended to create a system of mandatory, as you said, post-custodial supervision for prisoners released from custody. The Cabinet Office has continued to work with key stakeholders, because obviously you've got the prison service, the probation service, the police service, the judiciary and the LOD, to address points raised on the initial drafts and further development the policy that will underpin the new legislation. The most recent of the drafting activity in this area has been provision of the revised instructions on the draft during February 2025. The stakeholder group continued to discuss the best structures and highlight and resolve to prepare for the change in legislation and address key policy decisions. The stakeholder group last met in May and has now been suspended. So the legislation plan distinguishes between green items which have been a priority and amber items which will be developed as resources allow. The work on post-custodial supervision was assessed as amber by the Council of Ministers, and so work will continue when drafting resources become available. So it's an ongoing programme for us. My current understanding is that it's unlikely that we'll have sufficient capacity during this term of government. And
That's entirely accurate, Minister.
yeah.
So we just don't know when that's going to...
No, I mean, it's like with everything, obviously, as you know, under the Justice and Home Affairs, all of the legislation in relation to violence against women and girls has taken priority, and so everything else has sort of, some of it's sort of, the work's not sort of stopped exactly, but it's not moving forward as in the same sort of light, and we've had other legislation which has taken significantly longer than we had hoped, and so some people within the team haven't been able to move on to other things as well. It's one of those, really.
Resource. Thank you, Minister. The next section of questions relates to firearms. Conotard, like myself and Conotard Vibert, are more than familiar with this. Minister, you previously stated that it would be desirable to review or replace the Jersey firearms law. Can you advise the panel whether there are any alternative options outside of legislation that are being considered to strengthen oversight or improve safeguards in the meantime?
You're quite correct. Due to the change of government in 2024, the planned review was postponed, but the planned review was postponed really because the priority of the violence against women and girls legislation. As a result of that, as you are aware, I attended and met with the Comité de Conotard and asked if any of your group would be willing to, in conjunction with the States of Jersey Police, look at any potential for amendments which, in the meantime, would be able to be implemented by way of ministerial orders. Really to, I suppose, it was focused on reducing the risk in the community. This was covered under Article 57 of the Firearms Law, general power of the Minister to make orders. The working group has met on 3 occasions and has already agreed in principle to implement, with the agreement of the committee, and where appropriate, the Minister, a number of improvements. I recently, when in our last assembly, had a conversation with Constable Honeycomb in relation to this matter, and I don't know if he's actually put anything out publicly yet, but he was asking me what my views were on certain things, and we'd had some discussion. And so in relation to this matter, removal of the wording at question 28 on the application forms, which says if you wish to have in your possession more than 5,000 rounds of the ammunition at any one time, state the additional quantity and the reason for it. It is recommended by the group that when issuing a firearms certificate, it should be authorised without ammunition being included. The applicant would then need to apply separately if they wished to hold ammunition at their home address. I think if you think about it, the concern that's raised over many, many years is about the number of, as everybody knows, about firearms, but more importantly about the ammunition. So every applicant for ammunition will be held at a home address should be assessed as individually by the constable of the parish and considered on its own merits. This will mitigate the risk of certificate holders having easy access to firearms and ammunition outside of a club environment. Because I think that's what all of us sort of saw was that, the vast majority of the current registered firearms certificate holders only have authority to shoot at an approved club. So where they can readily purchase ammunition, therefore the requirement to store ammunition at home premises is really not required. However, it must be noted that not all clubs currently have the ability to sell ammunition. This is being addressed and there are further applications being submitted for my consideration. I think it's quite important that, there's a lot of work that's gone on. I'm grateful to a senior officer from the States of Jersey Police and the firearms officer for working with the constables, because that's made a significant difference. The working group also discusses, and you're probably aware, the issue of wish lists is where an applicant requests authority to purchase or require a vast number of firearms, different types and different calibers. There are currently examples of certificate holders who have authority to purchase or acquire in excess of 25 firearms. As these certificates are submitted for renewal or for a variation, the constables will review these and make the recommended amendments. This will ensure greater governance of the number of firearms being held and assist the constables to ensure that the applicants have a good reason to acquire those firearms. So that will make a change. The working group is currently considering making a request to have certain types of large caliber rifles, especially those that have been converted from a fully automatic firearm, military grade, added to the list of prohibited items. These types of firearms are not used for competition or suitable for general sort of recreational shooting. This will not preclude an applicant from applying for possession of them. However, it will require a separate licence from the Minister, which will give greater governance on these types of firearms and the good reason to possess. This is covered under Article 33 of the law. The working group will also be recommending the possibility that all references for applicants must either be a firearms certificate holder or have a good knowledge and experience in handling firearms and ammunition in order to be able to provide information on the applicant's competence with firearms as set out in question 20 of the referee's form. This will assist the constables on getting a better understanding of the certificate holder's knowledge and experience. I think this is really significant because we all know that, in an ideal world, we'd have the firearms legislation changed, the whole law looked at. However, this really addresses, I think, the majority of the concerns. And so I think, for me, that is a really valuable piece of work.
The current law allows a firearms certificate to be held for 5 years, with limited contact between the issuing authority and the certificate holder during that period. Do you believe there is merit in introducing a midpoint review? And if so, could this be achieved through revised guidance or administrative agreement with the CONITAB rather than a change in the law?
To be honest, from my perspective, I suppose that that may make sense, that somewhere during the period that person would be asked whether they still need the firearms, whether they're still shooting them. Because I think what can happen is that people acquire firearms today and in 20 years' time still have those firearms because people probably don't relinquish them, as you know, and they'll just continue to renew them every 5 years. And it may very well be that actually if we, mid-term somewhere, actually ask that question, maybe that is a possibility. It's not something that I would be averse to. I think it depends on how burdensome it becomes to yourselves as constables. But obviously, if it was something that was put forward by the constable, from my sort of memory, I don't think it's something that's actually been put forward. Yes, it has. Sorry. I think it's probably is something that's been considered. And my apologies, because there's quite a lot of information here. But yeah, it is something. But on my own view, I don't see a problem. I think if the constables think that that's, like I said, able and to be monitored and done, then that's a good thing, because I think there's an opportunity always there at those points to actually say to somebody, do you really need this? Are you still using it, etc., etc.? So I think that's actually a valuable thing to do.
Yeah, I think because over a 5-year period, we all know around this table things can change dramatically in that time, in perhaps a client's health, etc. Thank you, Minister. Can you please explain to the panel how the current system for temporary firearm certificates for visitors is working in practice, particularly with regard to compliance checks and public safety, given that all air weapons also require a permit under this scheme?
Well, Article 50, of course, doesn't actually fall the temporary firearms for visitors to the island. The authority falls under the Chief Officer of the States of Jersey Police, not the constables, so they have no authority to issue temporary firearm permits.
So, on a very regular basis, given the number of enthusiasts and shooting competitions that we welcome into the island, which I also welcome, I am asked to provide authorities on a fairly regular basis. That is done by a senior member of my team, or one member of my team, and he provides me with a very detailed background check on individuals. We look into their previous offending history. There's often very little offending history, but there is a vetting process before I then authorise. But I am content that it is as thorough as it can be for those visiting seeking to shoot weapons exclusively in competitions. And of course, as the Minister has said, that's my responsibility.
Jersey has had a very long tradition of firearms usage and competition usage, and we've had even gold medalists in Commonwealth Games, I believe. So that's a very confident reply. Thank you. Yes, have you considered, Minister, introducing or supporting a firearms amnesty, as has been suggested by some, to help reduce the number of unregistered or unwanted weapons in circulation? If so, would you be required to take such a proposal forward?
Because any amnesty for surrender of firearms, licensed or unlicensed, must be authorised by the Attorney General. The island has held two amnesties, one in 1999 and the introduction of the new Firearms Jersey Law 2000. The second was around 2017, which was run in conjunction with the UK. Both were successful with a number of firearms being surrendered. Of course, before I would make any decision in relation to this matter, obviously it would need to be decided where and who those firearms were going to be surrendered to, because obviously if it was going to end up within the remit of the State of Jersey Police, then obviously consultation with the State of Jersey Police and how that was going to work would obviously have to be done. But if it was going to be potentially somewhere else, and I don't know I can't off the top of my head remember what happened in the past, but I've got a feeling they may have come into the police station. Yes. But of course they may have been the fact that they were surrendered into one of the dealers. I don't know, so I wouldn't make comment on that. But I think anything to run something like this would have to be in consultation with the States of Jersey Police and those where that may actually go to, and obviously consultation with the Attorney General.
Yes, of course. We know obviously that one of the main dealers in Jersey is ceasing to operate. I think it's before the autumn this year, and so that would be good. The panel could be kept up to date because we think that might be worth revisiting in the near future.
I have no issue whatsoever, but as I said, it would be in consultation with all of those parties involved.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, I have some questions now about youth justice. And so, Minister, given your responsibilities for youth justice and detention, how are you working with the Minister for Children and Families to ensure that the future of Greenfields aligns with a justice system that treats custody as a last resort?
If you're happy,
Yeah.
the Assistant Minister for Justice and Home Affairs is actually working in relation to this.
Youth justice and responsible for Greenfields. Well, you know, youth custody is always a last resort. However, it's inevitable that there will be circumstances where a young person has to be taken into custody. And therefore we need a safe place for them. We intend, provided we get government funding, to redevelop Greenfields and to make it a better establishment, and perhaps to have, whilst having a main area which is either for secure accommodation or for youth custody, that there also be areas that perhaps where you would use for, I would say, are you familiar with the term inherent jurisdiction? That's where, you know, you have a child who is not necessarily in full custody, but there are terms and conditions attached. And you would have them in a less secure area where they can actually, under supervision, leave the home, go out for external education, So yes, there are plans for greenfields. Certainly there are no plans to close greenfields, but there are plans to make it a better establishment.
And how confident are you that government funding will be forthcoming?
Well, I think I'm as confident as anybody who's put submissions into the government plan. We have to wait to see if that's voted on. We have to see if we have, that the government are willing to back the plans for children and improve their chances of, if they've been into the criminal justice system, improve their chances of going on to achieve, more positive outcomes. So it's very much in the government's hands whether they, if they support it, then we will go forward.
Yeah. So do you think the government will recognise that what's currently there is not sufficient? And
Well, I certainly
and that
hope
there's
so.
certainly good plans to.
I would certainly hope so.
Yeah.
A vast amount of work has gone into this, working with some of our other colleagues, and I would hope that the government recognises the need to do this.
Yeah. Okay. Have you received any operational concerns from the police about the current capacity or suitability of greenfields to safely manage young people? And if so, how are these being addressed?
Yes, I think it would be fair to say that we have. Greenfields was built for a capacity of 8, for instance. I think it's the registration has been up to 6 at times. It's currently gone back down to 4. We are looking at. I don't want to refer to particular circumstances, but we're looking at the operation of greenfields and how that can be improved. And as I say, and making it a safer establishment.
Okay. So,
There are some improvements that have taken place recently as part of that, and those will continue. Again, subject to receiving the funding.
yeah. Okay.
We have gone as far as we have gone at the moment. Now we need assurance that we will get the funding.
Okay. Was there anything to add to that?
Just a general point and then a more specific point. I think if there's one thing we're all in agreement of, and anybody watching this, is we don't want young people in custody anyway. There are, as members will know, approximately 18,000 children in the island, and the vast majority of those children never need any government services, and especially not the police. We're talking about a very, very tiny number. And that tiny number that regrettably ends up in greenfields, their offending history is significant. Very, very significant. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. And their vulnerability is significant too. There would be a lot of victims of crimes involved in that, as well as the individual's own vulnerability. In terms of greenfields, there was a very productive meeting we had about 2 weeks ago, which Chief Officer for JHA was at, where we looked at some of the contingency plans and I took it away as a genuine desire to continue to improve the facilities at greenfields, with challenges around budget, of course, but the numbers, thankfully, are very small. And those children that find themselves in greenfields, there is quite a significant history to those events, and enormous, I sense enormous reluctance to have to do that, but it is in everybody's best interest.
And I think, as part of the, there is no doubt that there is a series of offending where a young person sadly ends up with a custodial sentence, but it's also that in a number of cases they can be a danger to other children as well, and that's a significant issue that we have to consider.
Okay, thank you. So Minister, the roadmap acknowledges that further work is required to fill the gaps for young people aged 18 to 25 who are not covered by the Youth Justice Roadmap. So could you outline what consideration was given to the inclusion of young people over 18 and the transition to adulthood?
Well, of course, they certainly those 21 to 25 are, are considered adults unless there are particular circumstances. We continue to consider the facilities for. I think Arthur will correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we are considering where 18 to 21-year-olds are perhaps a different category when they enter the adult prison. They need more support. Yes. They're not necessarily, as fully developed as adults. And yes, that is something that is being considered.
I think sorry, Richard. I think what's important here is that all of us identify that the 18 to 25-year-old group can still be in a vulnerable group. Mm-hmm. And so I think with anything, it's important that once they become an adult at 18, that we just don't make all of the assumptions that they're an adult and they don't need that extra support. In relation to sort of, we have had some discussions about whether or not, you would have young people in different parts of the adult prison, but we've decided at this stage that we are going to remain as we are, because having had some significant discussions with Arta about it, and I think Arta's also had some conversations with the Children's Commissioner, yes, that sometimes it doesn't all, because we are such a small island and our population within the prison is significantly smaller, it's not always the best to have special facilities for everybody. So if you went to the UK, for example, you would have females prisoners, you'd have male prisoners, you would have your 18 to 21 prisons. That's not always going to work for us because the numbers and the sort of dynamics of it all isn't always the best. And so we've had significant discussions about it. And of course, that would also create some challenges for us because obviously the prison estate isn't necessarily in a state for that to be achieved anyway. So we've had significant discussions about it. And certainly from where we are now, and my view now, because at one stage I did consider whether that was a good idea to have different ages within the prison. But I now think that actually what we have and what we can achieve within the prison is the best as it is at the moment. Whether that changes in the future or not, is something different. But at the moment, what we have, we think is the best that we can have with what we have, if that makes sense. So that isn't going to change.
Okay, so lots of consideration given to
this.
this.
I think it's a moving object.
But there is some special acknowledgement of 18 to 21-year-olds.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah? Mm-hmm. And is that quite a large group compared to other ages, 18 to 25 in the prison?
It's under 10 at this moment in time. And the reason we have not separated that group of people is because we would create another cohort of prisoners. When we spoke about before, access to activities in the prison will make it more and more difficult.
Isolation.
Of course, and there's a risk of isolation. And some of those young people can benefit from role models of older prisoners, specifically selected to provide some mentoring as well. Sometimes the criminality by young people is perceived as fairly interesting subject, but hearing from older prisoners which spend considerable time in the custody. So if you don't change your life in a way, that not necessarily is the best life choice in a way. So thinking of spending time in custody, it's you need to think about how better to achieve the best outcomes for your life. And that sometimes having those young people in one group, they have number of conflicts in the community, and you transfer those conflicts to custodial environment, therefore becomes even more difficult to manage. That's why we keep them in a wider group of adult prisoners with strict security arrangements to make sure that they're being kept safe. And if they have contact with adult prisoners, is also on the risk assessment and pre-selected basis too.
Okay, good.
And I mean, outside of prison, of course, as children's services, we continue to support children who've been in our care up to the age of 25.
Yeah, okay.
Some of whom will have been in prison. But you also have to accept that some of them do not want that contact. You know, they won't, you know,
Integrate.
No.
Okay, thank you. Just a question now about sentencing. So, Minister, can you advise the panel whether any data or research has been undertaken on whether children in Jersey are disproportionately sentenced for minor offences compared to regions of the UK or Crown dependencies?
I don't know of any recently. I don't know. No.
It's a matter that's been raised with us, which I thought would be interesting. So,
So the sentences here are disproportionate.
for example, children in Jersey who might get into trouble for, I don't know, damaging property or something, which is not as serious perhaps as a violent offence.
And they've ended up in custody.
No, but whatever the sentencing is it disproportionate to another child doing something similar in the
Under
UK?
the age of 14, they wouldn't be charged anyway.
No,
Would you like?
Yeah, if you've got-
Clearly, I don't do the sentencing. I just do the arresting. But I think first of all it'd be useful to see what that means in context to those places you've already described, and we probably could do that with, given the close relationship we have with the other CDs, and indeed one or two of the overseas territories as well. That will provide us with context. But of course, the jewel we have here in Jersey is the parish system, and which does not exist anywhere else that I'm aware of, and therefore my judgment, although happy for it to be challenged in terms of data, is the parish hall system is one of the best systems I've seen in my entire service, because it doesn't necessarily criminalise children at that early stage for what some people might see as minor matters. So I would think instinctively Jersey would feature very favourably in that because of the parish hall system.
So,
And when you consider that children under sort of 14 are highly unlikely to be charged, I'm surprised that we're talking about disproportionate sentencing.
We hear a lot of really good things about the parish system and appreciate that, but it has been raised with us that it's potentially children are being disproportionately sentenced here for minor offences. Perhaps these were children who are reoffending many times, I don't know. This is why we're asking, is there any data collected around this?
I think Robin's sort of answered the part, and he can certainly speak to his cohorts. But I think the thing that I think my question would be, what does sentencing mean? Because when I think of a sentence, I think of a court sentence. I don't think of a parish hall inquiry as being a sentence.
But it's not.
Because it's not. It's a sort of a written or verbal. And as an example, I've seen juveniles dealt with for taking and driving away a vehicle in the past, admittedly, as a parish hall inquiry because they were first offenders and it was deemed that was appropriate. So I think it's a difficult one, and I think the word sentencing is a bit the thing that I think that confuses me, because
that could be a better word, perhaps.
But it would be worth, a few examples might be of benefit if you can go back to whoever's raised that. But also, as the police chief said about speaking to his counterparts,
I think you also have to take into account that in some cases they will appear in court having had numerous occasions where they were not charged with the same offence.
That, Minister, will be undoubtedly the case. Undoubtedly the case. That to get to a court, quite depending and on the seriousness, well, often it's not as serious. There would be quite a track record before we'd got there.
Yes,
perhaps a better word is sanction.
Yeah.
I think I think, rather than the sentence, because we get tripped up with, criminal courts and whatever. What are the sanctions for when things are committed? And those sanctions are often remitted, if that's the right word, to the parish hall inquiry for quite significant crimes.
And a lot of the decisions at parish halls can be deferred. So if they commit an offence and then behave, their sentences are deferred and they end up basically not getting a sentence, if that makes sense. So I think there's lots of sort of things. And of course, if somebody goes to court, and people might not realise that it might be their first offence in court, so they get a reasonable sentence, but then we're not looking at what the past was in relation to the parish hall inquiries and how much they've done previously. So it would be helpful for Robin, obviously, as he suggested, to speak to the Crown dependencies, but also if you wanted to go back and just verify what sort of thing that they're talking about, that's always helpful.
I don't think it's as easy as just looking at statistics.
No.
There is a slightly different system in Jersey, and it's what's gone before that probably makes the difference.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, I'd like to put on file and on record not only the comments made by the police chief about the wonderful work that is done throughout the parish halls in the island. I know I'm a constable and I have a wonderful force too, but they are all volunteers, and it's a great credit to them that you've given that great credit to them. So I put that on file, please.
Okay, I think this will be my last question about youth justice, but just referring to a recent case, for example, where around 50 young children, some as young as 12, were pulled into this organised drug network. So how is the two ministers, Justice and Home Affairs and Children and Families, working together to prevent the exploitation of children into these criminal activities?
I think first and foremost, what needs to be identified is that it was actually all of the departments that sit under Justice and Home Affairs and the Children's Minister, as in police, immigration, customs and immigration rather, the youth service and others, that actually dealt with this job as a collective. So effectively, the youth service took responsibility for those young people and took their welfare and concern, and a high percentage of them were dealt with at parish hall inquiries, etc. And then those that were, well, obviously the adult that was involved was obviously dealt with and got a lengthy prison sentence, and then the young people that were young people ended up, when they were at conviction, were obviously older and were dealt with as well and got custodial. I think the important thing is that in relation to all of those agencies and also the work in building a safer community, all of those things, by the fact that we are continually to work as a community across all of these different sectors of our community, we will always have this on our remit to protect young people. And so I think it's difficult to sit here and say, what are we going to do? What we're doing is that, the youth service are engaging young people all the time. And from my perspective, with the continuation of the violence against women and girls, that's another sector that you're bringing into this as well. So I think it's important that we keep this high profile and we continue to say and encourage young people that are involved in criminality in any way, shape or form, that when it's getting to the stage where it's getting a bit risky, now's the time to speak. And encourage young people to speak to their peers, speak to somebody in school, speak to somebody in the youth service, speak to somebody that they trust if they can't go to the States of Jersey Police. Because I think for me, the way to help prevent this is to encourage young people to have the confidence and ability to stand up and speak and to ensure that they're protected in this space. So I think for me, that's how we all work together.
Okay.
Unless anybody else wants to add anything else.
No. I mean, we're Children's Services and Justice and Home Affairs are aligned on this, that it's, it's early identification of vulnerable children. It's diversion away from criminal activity if they're beginning to get involved. And once they are involved, it's helping them to break away from that and, you know, hopefully move to adulthood in a positive way. So I think we're completely aligned on.
I think as well that sometimes people don't realise that the State of Jersey Police and, you know, various departments within the Children's Service will meet on a significant basis. I don't know if it's every week now, but it's certainly used to, you know, it is all the time.
It's every day now.
It's probably every day.
Yeah.
And of course, the youth service works with the community officers. So I think, you know, and by the reintroduction of building a safer community as well, this really is starting gelling things back together. We drifted when the funding was taken away we didn't drift from working together, I hasten to add, but I think the coordination and implementation of all of this work as a collective can only help prevent these type of things happening in the first place.
And if I could just add that the operation was Operation Java, and it got quite significant publicity for all good reason. You know, my job, our job is to catch criminals, and we're focusing on children here, but also catching criminals. And JSIS also played a very significant part in all of that, in identifying who the criminals were. They all pleaded guilty. One got 6 years, and there was 3 others. And they were exploiting children, threatening children and the like. Now, whilst that's probably the best case of multi-agency working that I've had, other than the major incidents that we've had, this investigation went on for over a year. Children have been exploited for years and years. Oliver Twist was about the exploitation of children in crime. So this is the first time really that we've seen it exposed in the way that it's been exposed. And to be able to safeguard as many children as we did working together, I think it was about 43, something like that, as well as get the convictions in court. My hope is that acts as a deterrent, that, you know, you want to come to this island because it was done off island, it was done from someone in the UK. You want to come to this island, you want to try and get a criminal network, a drugs network. We work well together, and the only sort of, well, it's not a regrettable outcome, is we just make sure that we fill up your accommodation, because that's what's going to happen.
That's one way of putting it. Yeah.
Well, hopefully that's the deterrent everyone needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's all the agencies working together,
Yeah.
publicising
Yeah.
how well it's being done, and encouraging children to speak up are main points then, yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We're moving now on to the panel would very much like an update on the state of Dewberry House, please. Minister, at our hearing on the 22nd of August last year, you informed the panel of the plans for Dewberry House Sexual Assault Referral Centre. Could you please provide the panel with an update, please, on the progress of these plans?
Right. Obviously, there was the planning appeal in February 2025, and that was dismissed in May. JPH are quantifying the shortfall notably through increase in building and material costs, because that's what happens when things are delayed, through an updated estimate requested from the quantity surveyor, along with updated fees from the project consultants. Now the appeal is over. Discussions are taking place with the Treasury to identify a potential funding source through the long-term capital plan process for the budget for 2026-29. Only once the funding source is found will the next steps of tendering for suppliers be progressed. Yeah, that's it really.
Can you advise the panel perhaps when the work is expected to start?
Not until we get the money.
No, okay.
So that it is unfortunate, because it's like with everything, you have a budget and then things change because of things that are outside of your ability to change. So we are where we are, and we're going to have to get additional funding. So once that is secured, then obviously then it will be able to progress. Until that such time as that happens, then we are stationary at the moment, unfortunately.
Obviously, as time ticks on, inflation increases.
And it'll be week on week,
Yeah,
pretty much.
And there's a lot of work has gone into this already, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Years and years.
Yeah.
Years and years.
Yes, in which case I think that's fairly plain. Thank you for your answer, but obviously we're concerned about the VORG annual progress reports and et cetera, and this is an integral part of it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I don't have to tell you, Minister, that.
Not at all.
Absolutely.
Not at all.
Under recommendation 65 is marked as complete with no further action, so it's very confusing. Could you, the Minister, outline what steps were taken to implement this recommendation and the progress made in recommendation 65 and why it was marked as complete or with no further action?
Remind me what is 65?
65.
Off the top of my
That one.
head.
About working with, it's for
Yeah, recommendation 65 calls for the Dewberry House Sexual Assault Referral Centre to work closely with Jersey Action Against Rape and Jersey Domestic Abuse Support and the Children and Young People Education and Skills Department to promote better awareness of these services within schools and other sites for young people in the annual progress report. This recommendation is categorised as complete.
My apologies, but there's 77 of them, and I couldn't tell you probably what is number 1 or number 5.
should we send you that one in
We'll-
writing?
No, I can give you an answer to it. I've got the answer to it. It's just that I didn't obviously know which one it was. Ongoing awareness of the CSA pathway and SARC services continues with multi-agency, including schools. SARC providing input on SPB professionals training on courses titled When Children Tell, aimed at raising awareness of the pathway and services of the SARC. In addition, the updated version of the Victim and Witness Charter is nearing completion and is expected to be finalised in the coming months. So that work is being done.
It is.
It is being done.
Thank
yes.
you, Minister. Thank you for your information. Okay,
Okay,
thank
yeah,
you, Chair.
just I have a question on Dewberry House still, because there was an amount set aside from was it the criminal, the COCF?
COCF, yes.
Yeah. And so is that still there? Is it just the shortfall that's needed?
It's shortfalls.
Just so it's just the shortfall.
It's just
so
the
the rest
shortfall.
of it is still
Yes,
set aside.
yeah, because once funding is allocated from the COCF, it's not going to be removed, but it's just the case that costs have gone up.
Okay, so we might hear about that in the new government plan.
Just for the public, Minister, could you describe what the COCF is for the...
Oh, it's the criminal
Criminal offences confiscation.
yeah, criminal offence.
Criminal offences confiscation fund.
Stuck on it. That's why I said
Listen,
COCF.
I have problems with certain words all the time. Let's be clear about
In
this.
simple terms, it's the cash we take off criminals.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's better,
thank
isn't
you,
it? Yeah.
Chief.
Yes.
It's just that for public,
Yes.
they won't know what that is.
Okay.
So many acronyms.
So if I have some questions now about transfers of people to Jersey or requests who are registered sex offenders from the UK. So the probation service will accept a UK transfer only where the sex offender has close ties with the island. Who sets that test? How is it evidenced, and how often has a transfer request been refused in the past 3 years?
You mean for transfer in of...
For people who want to come over to Jersey who are registered sex offenders.
So once they've served a sentence and they're coming, so picking up the point from the JMAPA report.
Yeah.
So we wrote, I think we wrote you after that last panel, didn't we? Archer, I don't know if you know, but I don't think we've got it. I think we thought this question was more about transfers of of local prisoners out to the UK.
Yeah, and we had, plenty of information back from you about that. So this is about people who want to come to Jersey. I think it said there was it was a small number of people, but we wanted to find out about the process around them coming here.
So that can be explored in two specific aspects. So if someone is currently serving a sentence in UK, you want to transfer during the sentence, that could be done under unrestricted transfer. And the same principle will apply because it's a reciprocal arrangement between transfers from Jersey to UK and UK to Jersey. So the same principles will apply. The person will have to prove the links to Jersey, whether they'll be supported here during the custody or post-custody. And that will be assessed by the prison service and probation as well.
Yeah.
If they have any license provisions and probation supervisory requirements that have to be confirmed by the probation service would be able to achieve and supervise that person on the alert. And based on that, agreement will be reached and possible transfer arranged.
Okay, so that assessment's done. Do you know if any have been refused in the past 3 years, or we can always send that to you in writing afterwards if you want?
Maybe let us check, but I don't think
Yeah.
we're aware of any.
Okay, and I've just a little bit more on this. So, Minister, in your letter to the panel on 15th of May 25, it was stated that currently, for any sex offender who wishes to move to Jersey, for low or medium risk offenders, this is done on an informal basis by prior agreement between police forces. Can you advise the panel what safeguards ensure that a UK force doesn't downgrade a risk category to expedite a move?
It certainly won't do that. So what we have within States Jersey Police is our offender management unit, and our offender management unit is those that monitor registered sex offenders on a daily basis.
Yeah,
So that's how we do the monitoring.
yeah,
And it's rare in my experience that people are coming who are sex offenders coming into the island. It will be tiny numbers. I confess, know those numbers, but those numbers will be very small. But that's why we have a dedicated, what we call the OMU, to monitor, which they do on a daily basis.
So could you outline the current process of supervision of an offender if they move to Jersey and stay here?
Could I write to you about that? Because some of that might be a bit more sensitive.
Okay.
So I could write to you that, and then you could determine what you'd like to share more publicly.
Yeah, okay. Just see if there's anything else to ask on that. Okay, I think the rest we'll put in writing then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So now we've got some questions about licensing laws. Minister, can you advise the panel on your views on the changes to alcohol licensing that came into force on the 30th of May?
I think I made it quite clear in my speech in the States Assembly that I am not in favour of drinks promotions across the board. So it's neither on licence or off licences. I am not comfortable with encouraging people to buy one, get one free in any circumstance. Obviously, the licensing, or happy hour as they called it, changed. And as a result of that, I have actually gone out on patrol with the police chief on Friday night, mostly because I wanted to see for myself what was going on. So on Friday night, we went out into the town, where mostly into the Weybridge area, because that's where most of the premises are, the later type of premises. What I can report is that we had conversations with both licensees and those managing the doors of those premises. And of course, the licensee and the door staff are the ones that are responsible for the policing of happy hours. What I can say is that on Friday night there was no issues, and in fact, certainly some will probably not be taking that route because they're on finite margins already. So at the moment, I'm quite confident that it's working okay, and I think the police would probably say the same. That was only one night for me, and I will probably go again later in the summer just to see if things have changed, but I don't know.
I share the Minister's view that I don't support drinks promotions. It was really good to go out with the Minister on Friday. I would describe her as interrogating some of the licensees rather than interviewing some of the licensees, particularly one in particular. I think maybe on the first Friday, everybody got a bit giddy, for want of a better phrase, about drinks promotions, and we saw lots of silliness, frankly. It seems to me, as predicted, that has sort of gone away because it frankly just isn't affordable. And one licensee we spoke to, or a manager, he was articulating that. So I think we might see some early hours stuff. Of course, the impact isn't in the sort of the 6 and 7 o'clocks at happy hour. It's in the 1s, 2s and 3s o'clocks when officers are outside dealing with the drinking that goes on. I absolutely agree with the Minister. We were out there for a couple of hours. You know, it was boisterous. It did not feel that it was going to get anything more than boisterous. There was a lot of people enjoying their evening. There were 1 or 2 arrests later that evening, but inevitably they always are. Those arrests are always alcohol driven. For context, crime went down 50% during COVID when the pubs and clubs were shut.
Says it all.
50%.
Yeah, says it all.
99% of all arrests on a Friday and Saturday night after 8 o'clock will be alcohol related. Not necessarily in pubs and clubs, but at home and that sort of thing. But that's not necessarily a stat that will shock anyone. So I agree. What we do is together we look and monitor. I know Marcus and Anna at the Hospitality Association, they're all over it too, because they see this as a good thing for the hospitality industry, which of course police would support. But also he wants to ensure, Marcus, I've spoken to Marcus, he wants to ensure that it's properly policed. That is those establishments that are part of the association. So he too wants to make this a success for all good reason.
So I was going to ask about the impact of changes to alcohol licensing on policing, but you're assessing that now, really, seeing how it's going. And
My general view is, irrespective of licensing promotions, alcohol features too much in the arrests that we make, and that would have been the point that I would have made at the Assembly. It is the majority of arrests on a Friday and Saturday night are alcohol related, and I think that is too high. In terms of the changes to drinks promotions, I think that will just find its way. It'll settle down. I can say to you that we're not seeing any massive uplift in demand as a result of the changes, but we as the Licensing Assembly said, we will continue to monitor that and we'll report back into the Minister as and when necessary.
Okay, thanks. So, Minister, can you advise the panel on your views on whether you feel responsibility for licensing should remain with the Licensing Assembly?
I believe that the legislation is going to change, and that doesn't sit with me. It sits with the Minister for Economic Development.
Okay. Do you have nothing else to say on that?
Not really. I've worked with the Licensing Assembly for many, many years. The new legislation will change the dynamics of that. That's the law being brought by the Economic Development Minister.
Law is necessary.
Well, it's the whole of the law is being changed. The current licensing law has lots of different categories. It has 6 different categories, all saying different things. It's needed updating for many years. I can't remember exactly which is. I might even be thinking that it's 74. Well, anyway, I think it might be 74. I don't know. Anyway, so it needs updating. So it's other things, but it's changing all of it. Personally, I don't really have strong views either way.
Okay, thank you. I think, is that me?
Yes, okay. We'll move on then, Minister, to the subject of drink driving. The Alcohol Profile 2024 highlighted a sustained and significant role of alcohol in impaired driving incidents in Jersey. Can you provide an update on the figures for instance of this for this current year, 2025?
This year to date, we have had 57 arrests for being drunk in charge of a vehicle, compared with 69 for the same period last year, so an 18% reduction. The Fatal 5 continues to be the campaign under which the States of Jersey Police seek to tackle the most common and dangerous behaviours that contribute to road traffic accidents and fatalities.
The Policing Plan 2025-2028 targets improving road safety as one of its key goals. Can you inform the panel, please, of what work is currently being done to ensure that the States of Jersey Police are reaching this goal?
Obviously, speeding, driving above the speed limit or too fast for road conditions reduces reaction time and increases the severity of the crashes. So therefore, as and when resources are available, this will be dealt with by the General Patrol teams. Drinking, as you've already said, drinking under the influence, driving while impaired by alcohol, drugs or both, which significantly impairs judgment, reaction time and coordination. Again, this will be, and interestingly, on Friday, when I arrived on Friday evening, somebody actually said that 4 people had actually been stopped in relation to their driving, but actually they weren't over the prescribed limit. So, be aware that if people drive badly, then they will be stopped. Not wearing seat belts, obviously, failure to wear a seat belt increases the risk of serious injury or death in a collision. And obviously what people must remember, that is both for front and back seat passengers, because of course, in any crash, anybody not wearing seatbelts within a vehicle can get serious injuries. And of course, that has serious impacts on all services and both the people that are injured and other services as well. Careless driving, this includes a range of behaviours such as tailgating, improper lane changes and failure to obey traffic signs, of which can lead to accidents. And of course, highlighting at the moment, I think in the UK, is actually cyclists going through red lights, and we see cyclists. And of course, a reminder that it means all things that are traffic related. That includes bikes, motorbikes, cars, etc., etc. So all of those, if they run the red light, then they will be dealt with by the States of Jersey Police. Using mobile phones, you'll be aware that Jersey was the first place that had actually specific legislation for the use to prevent the use of mobile phones because of the difficulties with proving driving without due care by using a mobile phone. So it's a distinct offence that distracts from people's driving, such as texting or making phone calls, reduces the driver's attention and reaction time, increasing the risk of crashes. And we've had some serious incidents in relation to the use of mobile phones where people have actually had serious road traffic collisions. So those are still all on the remit for the States of Jersey Police, and obviously will be dealt with. Some of those will be obviously whilst people are out on patrol. Others will be targeted in relation to when they've got time to actually target and do other things.
Thank you, Minister. Can you advise the panel of who is responsible for ensuring the long-term strategy for road safety?
Well, that's a sort of an interesting question, because obviously the Road Traffic Jersey law sits with the Minister for Infrastructure. However, the legislation, but the enforcement of that sits with this OJP. So it is actually a combined responsibility, in my view. We are the enforcers, and the Minister for Infrastructure needs to ensure that all legislation that's needed needs to be done as quickly as possible. So if there's a gap in the law, then, as I said, in recent, well, it's quite a long time now, but in recent years, there was a specific offence for mobile phones. So all of the legislation that's brought forward by the Infrastructure Minister needs to be quickly done. And we need to ensure that we have the resources to actually implement all that legislation so that we can prevent some of these serious incidents, which we'd all like to do.
And that's the nature of my next question, because obviously it's a multi-ministerial activity. Has the budget been allocated specifically for this priority?
No.
Just add to that, to the general point that the Minister for I&E, Constable Jahan, has been very supportive, particularly over the last year, with building a strategy to work together with some of his team and our team, because we all know in this room how important road safety is in the island. A number of the DIC, a number of the drunks in charge that the Minister has just referenced, a number of those are anonymous calls to the police station, as well as other forms of intelligence, and that's concerned islanders anonymously telling the police, and then we respond. And if we don't learn anything from the tragedy that is Dean and Charlie Lowe, how anybody can drink drive after that tragedy is a concern. There is no specific budget for roads policing, and there won't be a specific budget for roads policing. It is a day-to-day activity, and it is a day-to-day activity. Officers are deployed on a daily basis, particularly in the earlier shifts and in the later shifts. But there isn't a dedicated roads policing unit. It is a day-to-day activity by the policing teams.
Thank you.
Yeah, just as a clarity, the road safety strategy and budget sits with the Minister for Infrastructure. So, you know,
Could I just add one small
portfolio.
point about an enormous amount of work around roads policing and road safety and speeding is done by our honorary police colleagues. The vast majority of that work is by our honorary police colleagues in the parishes.
Thank you. Minister, in our previous hearing, you mentioned the States of Jersey Police conduct specific campaigns at times of the year that have been linked with an increase in drinking and driving. Please could you advise the panel of any campaigns that have been conducted this year currently?
No campaigns this year. We often do campaigns in the run-up to the festive period.
Yeah.
That's when we see parties and the like. Campaigns will exist and be arranged for the latter part of this year, amongst other things as well, including, you know, speeding type campaigns, reducing speed. So none though this year, but so far this year, but some planned for the latter half.
Thank you. We won't be specific about that because that's important not to remain in the public domain. The police highlighted a deeply concerning increase in Islanders driving while over the legal alcohol limit in 2024. What, if anything, is being done to address this?
I think exactly what's just been said, really. It's more campaigns, not only from the point of view of having, you know, set nights where, you know, the police will go out and the honorary police will do it, but also I think it is about, you know, the campaigns and the education about not drinking and driving and the consequences of all of that. So I think it's like with everything, when the sort of festive season starts to come, then the publicity will be done again in relation to all of that. So it's reminding people constantly about not drinking and driving.
There was 129 in 2024 cases of drunk in charge of a car. That was up from 119 the year before, 2023. But as the Minister has indicated, we are seeing thus far this year an 18% reduction for the same period last year. Enforcement is one thing, a very important part of what we do, but as the Minister said, this is becoming increasingly socially unacceptable to drink and drive. And it is more peer pressure that is going to be more effective than actually enforcement. Peer pressure about it is just not acceptable to do that. But they all come together, and hopefully by the end of the year we'll see a reduction. But we'll obviously report back that in time.
Thank you. Just a supplementary, if I may, Chair. How concerned are you about the driving while under the influence of other substances?
My answer may surprise you in that I'm more concerned about that than I am about the alcohol. Yeah. Because it's harder to detect. You know, we have machines that can detect breath. It is harder to test. It's harder to do roadside tests. Part of the work we're doing is looking at how better we can do that. There are some studies in the UK where they've stopped X number of motorists and more have been under the influence of other substances than they have been alcohol. So that's an area where we need to move into because we are concerned about people being intoxicated by other stuff.
And off the top of my head, and don't think I'm wrong, but I've got a feeling that the Infrastructure Minister is looking at the legislation in relation to that, is he not?
I believe that is the case because we have some gaps, but we also have some really good opportunity to learn from what's going on in the UK.
Yeah. And I hope you keep the panel informed because it concerns me greatly personally. So thank you. And any advance in technologies as well for roadside testing is very important for all of us, I think.
Yeah, I think there was, wasn't it being looked into, the devices for roadside testing of drugs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there is some. We need a law change to be able to use it, but there is some. Believe it or not, the system we use to test the amount of alcohol in people's breath and then in blood, that machine is over 40 years old.
Yeah.
And the reason for it is it's really good.
And it works.
Yes. So we need something similar.
Okay, so just have a few questions now about gas and emergency planning. So, Minister, can you provide the panel with an update on the proposed amendment to the gas law, explaining why progress has been delayed? The debate's now expected in September, I think.
Right. The previously lodged draft amendment law was withdrawn in response to matters raised by IEG with ministers and Scrutiny. The updated draft will be lodged at the end of the summer. Officers in INE and emergency planning continue to regularly meet with officers from IEG as well. So,
Okay.
Thank you. Could you provide the panel with an update on the status of any new or revised emergency response protocols for gas disruptions?
yeah.
So we publish, we've produced, it's not published, sorry, the Gas Emergency Measures Plan, which is one of a suite of similar emergency measures plans. We have one for flooding, for example, about a year ago now, actually. So that will be refined should we have another incident. Heaven forbid, let's hope we don't. But each time we have a near miss or a leak, then the team will reflect on what that's taught them, and it will inform the plan. I would stress the working relationship with IEG and Infrastructure and Environment, the State of Jersey Fire and Rescue Service and the emergency planning team is now materially better than it was. So that day-to-day engagement on incidents and sort of more proactive engagement for infrastructure and IEG on the works that they're undertaking is much better than it was. So we do have a plan in place. It's ready to be followed should we need it, and it will be continually improved.
And the gas emergency measures response plan as well would be
That's what I mean,
constantly updated.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. So just, I know you've mentioned about the relationships being so much better than they were before. But could you advise the panel whether you have met with the Chief Executive of IEG recently? And if no meetings have taken place, why not?
We had a series of meetings earlier on in the year as we were dealing with a number of issues as the new chief exec was coming into post. Of course, he did a states members briefing at that point as well, and we had a number of meetings with him around the new law or the proposed amendment law. We haven't met since then because, as you know, it was originally lodged for debate and then delayed, but then we decided it was better to withdraw. And what we were intending as a result of that is we can withdraw, get all the amendments right, and then bring it back as a single piece of law change rather than the States Assembly having to debate lots of amendments. Our commitment to everyone in doing that is that when we bring it back, the report will be very clear on what's changed, and we will have met with IG and discussed and explained that to them before the States debate it. So we expect a series of meetings to come, but there has been a bit of a gap because we've just needed a bit of time to redo the legislation as a result of feedback, not just from IEG actually, but from our own sort of further scrutiny and obviously discussion with you as the scrutiny panel as well.
That's great. I think we've got maybe one more question.
One more question. Okay, it's about the Jersey Police Complaints Authority. The JPCA is due to become the Jersey Police Complaints Commission in 2025. What practical support is your department providing to ensure the transition goes smoothly and that the new commission is properly resourced to meet its responsibilities?
I think it,
Do you want me to?
yeah.
So am I sort of the sponsor for the Police Complaints Authority as it is now, or commission as it will be, specifically to ensure that that sponsorship is not done through the States of Jersey Police, but is done on behalf of the Minister through a slightly different route and part of her department. So I meet regularly monthly with Chris Stevenson, who's the now chair and will continue to be the chair, including most recently by coincidence yesterday. And so we are anticipating that the regulations will be lodged in the next 2 weeks. I'm looking at Nathan because it has been a long process and we will be extremely keen and pleased to get that off our desks and get it implemented. Chris doesn't foresee any extra resourcing needed as a result of the change to the Commission. We've already put a fair bit of investment in, anticipating that the change would be a bit earlier, to new website, for example, new branding, and they did also relocate offices about 18 months or 2 years ago. There's a very capable part-time administrator in the team, and she and the chair expect that that will continue to be satisfactory. He has just recruited a number of new members that are going through the membership approval process, and until it becomes a commission, they do have to come to the states for approval as the authority. So, whereas in the future it will be done by ministerial decision in line with other similar bodies. So you'll get some visibility of that. But Chris is very pleased with the appointments, and that will slightly increase the number of members and that volunteers, of course. That will give him enough as a team to work on the matters that will arise as the commission. They're having a workshop next week for all members to work through and sort of understand what the practical implications of the regulations are. And we have already had a piece of work done, as have the SOJP, I think, on what under those regulations the practices and procedures would be for the Commission, for themselves, and as they relate to the Professional Standards Department and SOJP. So actually a lot of the preparatory work was done some time ago and just needs refreshing because we were hoping the regulations would be in earlier than they are. So we've done a lot of the planning and preparation already, and that resource has already been committed and expended.
Well, there it was.
Yeah, and so we've just got to 11:30, and we've just got just a few questions. If we could send them to you in writing.
Of course, yeah.
left.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much,
Thank you.
everyone.
No, thank you.